We'll start streaming on the perfect during the perfect bite and munch. Portal Mountain development number meeting number 75. Do believe. Welcome. We are kind of taking a break from all the programming, planning of the dashboard software, product, all that kind of stuff, and getting into mythology.
Small break. I'm burnt out. I'm currently the sole developer still, so it's not a jab at anybody. It's just the reality that I just don't have enough of myself. To
Yeah, we all
float around.
feel ways like that very often. Myself included. Like I was working over the Christmas, New Year break a lot at the shop, just doing putting in some crazy hour, and it's like at some point you just kind of either snap or break, or before that you kind of recognize. But I just kind of cold turkeyed it for the past week plus.
Yeah, right now I'm still kind of development-wise, programming-wise, strictly speaking. I'm still kind of holding all the cards at the moment, which is.
But every time it's always in that kind of a burst, and then a lull period where remember this is actually natural to the model as well.
Yeah, I'm not. None of this is a complaint. What I'm more speaking to is
it's a contraction phase.
Until we have greased all the wheels, all the cogs, and the machine, our machine that we're building. It's going to stay like this, and I understand the reality of it. But it doesn't stop me from going. Come on. Let's go.
Well, it's still interesting and fruitful as ever. So why wouldn't we, right?
Yeah, and even though we're going to be discussing mythology, it's going to relate back to the dashboard because nobody here was privy to that. But I started our conversation today with talking about games and stuff, right? And that was mostly to drive back into how their storylines drive the dashboards that you get in the gameplay, right? And so every component of what you do in that scenario is actually shaped by said mythology, right? Like in a war game, for example, you are tasked with managing inventory for shooting things and protecting yourself from being shot at. In a SimCity simulator, for example, you're tasked with making the roadways so that traffic is, flowing. Very different concerns, but the mythology of the game itself, like the presupposition of the game, is what drives what you are able or not able to even do. What's a thing, what's not even a thing in that world. That's sort of like a layman's way of going about talking about what mythology is trying to be, what we mean by the word mythology, and how it relates back to what we're doing with ourselves in terms of that software. But really today, I think we're going to more focus on why mythology is as important as it is, because I don't think that's been addressed properly. It has been addressed, but just not I wouldn't say it's in enough detail.
The idea of mythology hardly ever gets respect, I feel like.
For one, what the hell do we mean by the word, right? And why does it matter, and why we're talking about it?
Nice. Nice. What do you call it? Thumbnail. I think you're being either possessed or sucked away by aliens or something. Alien under the table, maybe. So, yeah, it doesn't. Mythology is automatically, normally, I think, in culture, thought of as something that's made up or fake, inherently known false.
Sorry, say that again, the first part?
Mythology and culture, in our culture, the word mythology. How it's taken. It's
stories
taken,
that are not true.
It's taken to mean, false stories, not actual, made up, right?
Yeah, and that's not the way we are using this word. at all.
That's actually, yeah.
And that's,
Right.
that's step one.
Yeah.
To move away from the connotation of the word to indicate preemptively that something is not true, and to like the mythology that we're talking about doesn't deal with whether something is
Right.
true in
And
the
so
scientific sense.
when you say in that terms, like we are kind of asserting mythology, whether you call it Portal Mountain,
or a model,
model.
yeah. So the story we're weaving of how things are pieced together would be an example of a mythology, and the final point that we'll get to at the end is to say that that's the mythology that is actually most useful, and with
Right.
anything denying that mythology is actually is a form of an exploitation, one way or another, whether it's
Or not
shallow
even
or deep.
not even denying it outright, which would be like
Twisting it.
anti or against, but
Twisting it for its own,
Um,
for different means to create value, to create money, essentially, if you will. What that money is another story. We're not talking
you
about
could say
dollars.
intentionally left out. So we're talking about charlatan who can say and lay out an amazing vast system of just beautiful human interconnectedness, but to not include these sort of meta mythology with that means that there's something missing because it's being pushed in a way, and it's hard to like
Yeah, and
pin that on someone and say, oh, it's bad that you didn't include that, because
yeah, we're not.
there's no time always to talk about the meta mythology, right?
There's not time. There's not necessarily enough skill. And this isn't a jab and saying that this is like every time it happens, you did this on purpose, kind of a thing, right? Like it's just what I would want to actually paint the picture of is that whenever you have that happening, you probably have a kind of a bleeding going on, which is monetary. So, in other ways to see it is basically you have the system, its clause in whatever that's going on. For example, the way the system treats the church, right? So long as the church plays by its rules, it's cool to exist. As long as the system can siphon off the rent money, it can siphon off the license to do this, it can siphon off the license to do that.
And we're
There's
starting
like
off
all of
with
these kind of-
mythologizing here a system as kind of like an
Yeah.
existent entity.
Yeah,
Just want
there's-
to point that out.
There's a lot
When
of
you say the system, that can be taken a lot of ways, right?
right. So we're not starting from square one with defining the system, but suffice it to say,
We have used it interchangeably with the spectacle too, right? Kind of.
so the spectacle is.
But there's
the
also
way,
system and then there's model. But
So-
there's the system and there's the
Right.
spectacle. But there's also spectacle, which is a layer, right?
Yes,
Every
yes,
single
yes,
one
yes.
of these things have all been
Yes, there
teased apart.
there is the term spectacle, then there is the spectacle to which we would want to actually make the most emphasis, give the most emphasis to. So anytime you have like a capital T, the, in the model, you're looking at the layer, but you're also looking at a very specific example of that layer as well. So like there's the APS layer.
Yeah, so
and then there's
spectacle
the
as
APS.
the story of what's happening in your concrete experience. This is related to myth too, like the model as myth, right? That
Yeah.
there is a spectacle. You may observe it at any moment, right?
Sure. Yeah. But then the spectacle is the spectacle that the overarching myth is expressing. So the system is the overarching myth, right? So the spectacle that it presents is that of the system, and that particular spectacle is called the spectacle. What does it produce? More of itself. Just like the system, more of itself. It follows exactly the same pattern.
Right, yeah,
It
okay.
sells itself through the spectacle,
Okay,
basically.
so
It justifies itself through it.
So you've
it-
identified two layers on the holonic model, right? Or in narrative and concrete, or
yeah.
right?
So the concrete is where you have your spectacle play out.
Right.
The-
And that's
the
where you were
observer.
saying with the spectacle would you'd be encountering it.
Yeah, you're the spectator of that spectacle, is what the connotations are here. That, like, nobody gets to spectate the same things that you do, to each their own. But the spectacle is what shapes it for all of us in the grander, in a higher layer, so to speak. So that comes back to the mythology, where your formulation of your narratives aren't based on just your experience. It's your experience framed by the mythology, right?
Mhm.
So part of it, the mythology, is the language that you're speaking. So English is intertwined, and English definitions of words is intertwined into that,
Right.
which is its own mythology.
So actually, it seems like mythology isn't well understood as to what it's actually is in your experience,
Right.
how it's experienced, and what its shape is.
I have come up with a phrase to sort of that might help digest it better. It's basically the narratives that you truly believe without thinking about it. It's your reality. It's your description of reality. That's mythology. That's what the myth you're working. That's the myth you exist in. So it's not to say you're delusional, but it can say that, right? Like it's not a it's. Excuse me. And the other
Right.
part to it is
So-
that entropy speaking, you're gravitating towards a mismatch, and that's not a fault. It's a feature, so to speak.
So I think that everybody, if they haven't really thought about life, let's say the bigger meaning of life, or like, what am I doing on this planet? What is my purpose here? I can mute it, you know.
No worries.
Um,
I can hear. I don't want to stop.
You would get like an existential type of dread or whatever. There'd just be something missing if you haven't pieced together what the story of your body is, from imagining from birth like to death. Like, I was born and then I make this effect on the earth and do my best and whatever, and then I die. If that's an overarching myth, right? I'm an ape on a rock orbiting a sun, right?
Yeah, that's like, say, the nihilist.
These are
that's a nihilistic
purposes, right? But these are myths that encompass.
Yeah. So check this out. You probably didn't even notice it, but there's another myth that you skipped over, but it is a myth, and that is, like, those are your most profound questions. Who am I? What am I doing here? Why was I put here? And all
Yeah.
of that stuff. That to say that those are the most important questions is to create a myth right there
To participate in a myth.
and it's to say that answering those questions is the track that you're going, but that's the track that the myth defines, right? So and if you take that to be correct,
Yeah, right.
that's
yeah.
that's the myth that you're
So we're
living.
getting meta here, in that one of these myths has to be that we're sitting here making myths.
Right. But the basic definition I keep wanting to go for is, it's the story you actually believe without thinking about it.
Right.
So
And the point that I wanted to
which
make,
is why it ties it to reality.
um, is
As in-
that it's related to the ontological structure,
Yes.
the ontological matrix.
Right.
Those are the objects that are you
Set
believe
to
to
exist,
exist.
yeah.
The types of things that can be, almost like if you were to imagine a snapshot of like the Garden of Eden or the perfect world, where
Yeah.
there's one of everything, and
So
they're all
take-
interacting perfectly.
So if you take that snapshot and ask yourself the question, what is naming every element in that matrix? Like, what is the thing that's giving
Right.
them
Yeah.
the
So
correct?
we're having the meta
is labeling
discussion
them.
again.
That is the myth.
So, yeah, that's the meta myth we're pointing towards.
And the meta myth says, what's the myth that labels all of them? It's literally just an acknowledgement of the situation itself.
It's always like
That
an
is the myth-
asterisk that just says,
it's
go,
its own
whatever
mythology.
your context is, just go inward.
Because this is another narrative. The difference, though, is that it's actually correlating to
so
experience.
I wanted to connect, or try to connect, or figure out how to connect for people the idea of believing that, or like, as much as you and I know what a car is, what a chair is, what a table is, right?
Yeah.
That's actually the only reason that that's coherent altogether is because myth has woven those into stories.
Yeah.
Right? And so the myth is inherently connected to that idea of believing that a table exists, that a car, of course, I know what a human body is. I know this and that. You don't think about it.
Right.
Right? And we think that it's so pure and ontological, but it's actually story based.
I got a wrench for that bike wheel, like easily. A stick for the bike wheel for that one, easily. You just use the word for car from a different language and see what happens. Just purely translated. So in Russian, the word for car is mashina, which is machine. Straight up. So if you change the word car to machine in any sentence casually, right, it breaks that myth. Because in English, the word machine is a representation of a bunch of different categories of machinery.
Yeah.
So you're not going to start thinking about four wheels.
You could
You're
just
not,
you could
it's
you could
one,
accept
it's
that
one,
as
it's one option.
with say
From context, you can do that, but the language breaks.
that would be like a conversation modifier for something to happen within a conversation, even an ongoing conversation between somebody. Okay, we agree to call this that now.
I wasn't trying to make like a great example of anything. I was just trying to illustrate that there's seams that you can actually start to unravel within the initial mythology by just doing a bit of linguistic trickery.
Mm-hmm.
By switching up the layers, going down a layer, switching it up a little, going back up a layer, the top layer stops making the concrete sense it used to.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have to figure out which machine you're talking
like
about.
cones.
Right? It
that
adds
kind of
that
stuff.
complexity to it without even doing anything to the structure of the sentence. Just changing the words.
Right.
It's it's a mental gymnastic, obviously, but the point is there's seams in the mythologies.
We have also outlined in the book, which hasn't come up for a while, but all the methods.
Yeah.
That's a gold mine.
We had like 1 to 2 methods per each temperament,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the temperament.
Right. It'll come back.
Yeah. Well, the
It's all
ideology
building.
arc is
It's like pure
definitely
white
one
out
of the
there.
methods. So.
Very white outside. I guess I can put the chat up a bit.
The outside is racist.
Yeah, so I just wanted to connect that for people to help get the idea that myth is actually not just stories you don't believe.
No, they're literally the stories that you do.
We're
believe.
saying, using a holonic model way of looking at it, that the things you think are real are intricately related to those big picture stories
Mythologies, yeah.
that you tell about the world around you.
Yeah.
That's what anchors those in a feeling of solidity, that this is that is that, because this myth uses it that way, that myth uses it.
And to not be too like abstract about what the myths are. The basis of this topic,
Hey, Eon, buddy.
the basis of the
Welcomes.
topic would have hey, how's it going? Excuse me. The basic of the topic is that there are systemic myths that are known and articulated by Darren. I'm going on first name basis now.
Mm-hmm.
The work itself is top. I didn't read the final version, but the work itself is very eye-opening, and it basically.
We noticed YouTube first, Eon.
And basically, what was I saying? He basically tries to articulate how the mythology is hidden within our own thinking makeup. How the system hides its own mythology under common sense and stuff like that. How it utilizes our innate feelings, immature feelings, feelings that have not been worked on internally by ourselves. Like, we don't deal with our anger issues properly. We don't deal with our depressive symptoms. We don't deal with our malnutrition. We don't deal with this, with that, the other thing, right? It hides behind all of these different, we don't do these things, by trying to weave a story that makes sense to you as to why these things are normal. and should continue, and should the status quo, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
How there is no other options for the way the
Yeah,
system
it's
is
the
set
best
up,
one we've had so far.
and there are no better ones, or possible, or even potential.
It's the best
differences.
out of all worse options, all bad options. The best,
And there are no good ones.
right? Mm-hmm. These kind of thought-stopping cliche.
Like the myth of merit, for example. You get what you deserve. On the surface, sounds great, until you realize that nobody is in the same context. Nobody is existing in the same context minute to minute. Nobody is existing in the same context hour to hour, day to day, week to week. Things change drastically, or can. They do for many, 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 many people. And when the system is like stuck in that, no, you are this, there's it's just basically whatever.
Like enforcement of karma.
It's like you deserve this misery for some reason. We can't quite pinpoint what that reason is, but since you feel this way, you deserve it. And that's a general sentiment, actually. If you think about how people treat poor people, they should be they should be less lazy. If you think about people that have problem with women, women should be less stuck up. It's always the other party's fault as to whatever the fuck the problem is. It's the system always obfuscates in that sense. It's a different calculation. No, you should think about it this way. No, you should think about it that way.
It comes out, I think, often as casually stated opinions.
Yeah.
Just idle conversation, that kind of stuff. You just say it as matter of fact. Little things like is what it is and all that.
Have you ever noticed that the people that say that they are the most independent people out there tend to repeat themselves, like each other? They're almost clones.
Here we go. We're getting political.
Well, no, it's not just
Hold on,
politics.
I'm gonna mute it for a sec.
It's not just politics. It's about anybody who's definitely sure of themselves, but they hold like a whacked up idea.
But that's what we're talking about.
And you
though.
can tell that repetitive myth has been transposed from this person to that person to this person, because on the surface of it, like, I mean, this is a very shallow analysis because I don't know the actual people's experiences, but when you have a group of people literally repeating each other, and the rhetoric is of how independent they are, I can't help but laugh a little. Because the irony is just glaring.
Right. But everywhere,
You're like
this
programmed to say
feeling
it.
is that we are making a free choice. We are independent.
Oh, we are
understanding the
definitely
mechanism.
fed that line from the system around
Right.
us in various different ways. Yeah.
It's fostered.
You're
everywhere.
entitled to all of this as long as it fits within a certain criteria. You can have your blue hair, you can have your brown hair, you can have your red hair, you can have your whatever. So long as it's about hair. Try to change the political system, for example, you're a target. Why? Because you're too small to deal with the bigger force. My understanding of the bigger forces, which is people with money, essentially, present to us.
Apparently, the API for chat has changed a bit. The choice between the less of two evils until all good is gone. Wait, I have a...
Yeah, I think
So all
I'm
the
in a very
goodness is
similar mental boat as that. Like, I'm pretty sure I am.
Yeah, I think that's what I was talking about, that type of sentiment.
I think it's driving my whole all or nothing sentiment that I probably present more often than I'd like. But that's just my.
I wish they didn't
personal
add that heart.
quirks as a person.
Heart to chat. It's like sitting right there.
Yeah, like I'm also a hardliner. Like, it's go deep or go home, basically. There's no half-assing any of this. It's not like the stakes are is that any half-assing is charlatanism. So, yeah.
Yep. Right, just trying to get Chad issue figured out.
Yep.
The heart was there above his head too before, I think. Kind of made fun of that. Maybe that's been there for a while, but kind of annoying.
I'm losing hair.
Yeah. So, myth.
Oh, happy birthday, by the way.
You too. Recently, I mean, that's been like a month ago.
We haven't met since before. So, cheers. Happy belated.
Older. Mm-hmm.
Older, hopefully wiser. Probably not, but hopefully.
Right. Wise enough to have our casual dev meetings.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was trying to kind of keep pushing it along towards something because, of course, we have a tendency of rambling. And I
Right.
just wanted to point that mythology is, as we're using it, model speak, is a thing that happens inside your as part of your cognition. We're not talking about myths or stories. We're pointing to something that happens inside your cognition to watch for. Right?
You mythologize, and
Yeah.
moreover, society mythologizes, and you install
Right.
said mythology.
So we're
into your own
normalizing.
thinking.
We're using it in a normalized fashion. That word, right?
Yeah, it's an activity that you do. Really, it's not so much about the what myth.
And we're not
talking about.
arguing whether it's good to believe in myths or not to believe in myths, any of that.
Yeah,
right?
it's more important to recognize them
This is
for their qualities.
the function of mythology
is such
is
that-
belief.
Yeah, yeah. This is all what we're saying.
Right.
That's correct. Well, to step back from that and to like go back into our model more, we can go down the list that you've generously recorded.
Sort of scratched.
The connection to narrative is very
We're
important.
trying to create an arc here today, talking about mythology for the reasons of the recent kind of
Yeah.
kick up or dust up in chat, just with reification and
Yeah,
these kind of-
and the idea that you can start throwing around a word like anti-Semitism being somehow in line with Dharma.
right.
Like there was like a bunch of weird connotations, and that's what actually made me think of mythology as a topic. Is because if you notice a person like this, what edgelordy, hardly probably a real what he would call an anti-Semite, or I would call an anti-Semite, because it doesn't know what the fuck that means,
Apparently, yeah.
right?
To most people. What that means to most people.
Off in his own little world, thinking about how it's all just semantics, right? Like, so I'm not particularly like that's not like my worst enemy sort of individual. I'm saying this because I have the Jewish background things, right? Like I'm mostly trying to frame it in a way that
So
makes
okay,
sense.
we're giving a bit more context on the thing, but yeah, it seemed like this person was just loaded up with a whole bunch of, like, I don't know, you'd have to, like, so many different myths, I guess, that you would have to engage on even to build a conversation of, like, what's going on.
We haven't seen each other since before his birthday and my birthday. So we both turned 40 December, and we are seeing.
Yeah, last meeting would have been New Year's.
Yeah, and we couldn't do that because of other obligations, obvious obligations.
Better,
Like, what kind of
slightly better
family
things
men
to
are
do.
we? So yeah, we got to celebrate today, basically, both of us. Let's call it that, man. Cheers!
Sure.
Cheers!
Yeah.
Cheers to the birthdays.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, the idea that was that sparked my thinking about today's topic is that broken mythology that they're going with, right? It's obfuscated. It's that whole obfuscated meta-narrative scenario where they're just getting bits, pieces of disconnected things. They're just trying to jam together into a single ontological matrix, and their mythology is
Right.
broken, essentially.
Yeah.
That would be the assessment.
We would pull up the matrix diagram, the ontological matrix.
Now, to go back into the model. It's part of the dream. There's like the whole regret of the past. There's the whole anxiety for the future thing. So that drives like what the ontological matrix should look like in your dream, which is based on that same narrative, which is obfuscated. And so what causes a person such as this to get so stuck on what we call that spectrum of stupidity, the four-quartered objectivity, subjectivity,
Mm-hmm.
two-dimensional spectrum? Well, it's just that. It's that obfuscated narrative gets them to jump from one quarter to the other quarter to the other quarter without any connecting mythology in between that tells them that they're on the spectrum of
And by
stupidity.
jumping, you mean having myth to fill in the different aspects of reality, if you will.
Like, the answer to this question is objective. The answer to that question is subjective. The answer to this question is moral. The answer to this question is realistic. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this jumping between the scientism, between the spiritualism, between philosophism, all of the different quadrants. What was the last one? Spiritualism, philosophism, scientism,
Religionism.
religionism, basically, like which are just different variations of really the similar theme of going from
starting from objective to subjective.
yeah, objectivism to not subjectivism. It's called solipsism.
Right.
In model speak, that's the
The other dimension.
counterpart. It's because objectivism is not objective. Those are separate isms.
So solipsistic and what was above?
Objectivistic. So above.
I mean, like solipsism versus like what was the
So
counterpart
we have
on that dimension?
You would picture this as left to right and top bottom, and
Yeah.
you repeat the
Left, right being objective, subjective divide, and then there's the top and bottom.
Also subjective, solipsistic. They're both subjective and solipsistic. So double the solipsistic, you get your spiriticism.
That's
whatever.
an old diagram. I don't know if
If you double the objectivism, you get the scientism. If you have primarily objective but flared with solipsism, that's where you get your philosophism. Where you get the solipsism flared with some objectivism is where you get your religiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Like
It's just been a while. I was trying to remember the.
It's like saying ultra subjective, ultra objective, mostly objective, mostly solipsistic, mostly somewhat solipsistic, mostly solipsistic. Like it's got like that four quadrant divide. So you go you go from most objective to less to when this solipsistic becomes the more dominant trait, and then it's just solipsistic, the extreme. Two extremes, two middles. Most people would basically be in the middle, but there are extremes. And whatever your mythology is doing, it's basically making you jump from those quadrants in the spectrum of stupidity to keep justifying the narrative of the system itself rather than anything to do with you. So you'll justify it
Right,
by this.
and that's the obfuscated part. What's obfuscated always tends to be how does it actually connect together? What unifies all these random conclusions and realities that I have?
Yeah.
What unifies it?
That's
right?
literally the job of the spectrum of stupidity, which requires to be held upon the ontological matrix. It's layered into it, right? It's weaved out of it. It's the thing that in the ontological matrix it does all the labeling. In the spectrum of stupidity is like, okay, well, this label means that. It's bad. It's great. You know, like all of these shortcut thinkings. And if you do all of these shortcut thinkings, what's obfuscated is the reason behind those thinkings. And the only thing that really explains the reasoning is those 33 myths. But when you read the 33 myths, they just don't help the actual person. They're just this weird arbitrary belief system.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the point I'm trying to get to. Like, there's nothing inherently bad, worse, whatever. It's just like a totally not you can't utilize that. It's utilizing you instead. That myth
Mm-hmm.
will actually make you its worker, so to speak.
Right.
Because merit, right? Progress, right? Nice, right? Like, see how all of these
Mm-hmm.
shallow good feel things are twisted in that direction of like, you do my bidding, and me, it's an entity that doesn't exist in the real world. It's just paper. Myth.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference. That's like, it's still not real, but
This is we come
it
up
is.
against it when in conversation with people in the world, day-to-day conversation. You just tend to encounter this kind of wall of myth, if
Yeah.
you will. Like, it doesn't matter what your opinion is. If you say there's something wrong with this or that, or you want to try and make something better, the reason why no one cares is
Because you're a
20-fold, 50-fold. There's so many things as to
Well-
why this is the way things are, and blah blah blah. Why should I change? That's the way it is.
Yeah, for one, if you try to strike up a conversation in that sense, like, if that person goes, "Oh, this is a hippie talking to me,"
Yeah, right
they've
away
al-
that happens.
they already have an entire mythology set up for how to
Mhm.
ignore you, and that nothing you can possibly say could possibly deter their ideology, because you're a hippie, and I don't listen to hippies.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Something
myth.
like that,
That's
yeah.
what myth is. Yeah, it's very, very, very
Mhm.
insidious, if you will. Is that the right word?
Insidious.
Insidious. Is that the right word though?
Um,
Tenacious.
both.
I kind of
Could
know.
apply.
I know them. I know these words vaguely, but they seem like they're correct.
Yeah.
I'm half-assing that one.
Innocuous.
Yeah, tenacious. I think because like, you can't get rid of it. Like, you can't just like, that's my problem. I have mythology working through my head. I will just fix that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's
Well, just stop doing
you
that.
like literally made another myth. So that's
Mhm.
the tenacity of it. Like, it's no matter how you frame it. If you have a narrative behind it, right? We're talking to a myth.
Mhm.
And moreover, you're not the first person to frame it that way. It is of a social construct. What's good, what's bad, what you need to fix, all of those
Yep.
all of that terminology is given to you by whatever society you're living in. The framing of your own thinking is completely manipulated through, not manipulated, that's the wrong word, filters through.
It's taken up through the
And there's
environment.
and there will be no specific original thought. It will just be unique combinations of the same given
Mhm.
thoughts regurgitated in different combinations, patterns, whatever, given that the variance that
Right.
it needs. It's like the alphabet doesn't change, but the words do.
Now, this interesting about this, to me, it kind of links in with the charlatanism discussion, is that you can have all these myths, which ultimately don't say jack squat about what's going on, what's happening, what is this, and
Which is really the criteria we're after.
right for this special, let's call it special meta myth,
Mhm.
meta model.
Literally the
etc.
only thing that would make it special in the first place.
So, I got the thought of the potential, because we do have a lot of myths that are functional, that society is working as it is for a reason, right? They could easily be shifted, maintained, manipulated down the road. Right now, they're keeping all of this world working how it does, right? So there's a lot of like technological value in those protocols and all of what
Right, that's
related.
it's as you know what, that's sunken cost fallacy.
Right.
I agree with you, and not only do I agree with you, but I also see why it's not like as a fallacy.
It's not a sunken cost.
It's sure of
It is a sunken cost.
It is in a
but-
way. It is in a way, but not one that you normally can just get rid of like, oh, it's a sunk cost, I just stop doing it again. We're not. It's not that kind of problem. It's way more insidious. It's way more integrated,
So,
such that even if you do recognize it, you can't just like, ah, can't invest any more into this. It sucks. Like you still
well,
have to.
that's what,
You still have to.
right, that's what people often think. Oh, just wipe it out, start over. Ha ha. Right. Meanwhile, how many tens of thousands of years does that take, or whatever?
Yeah, like that's not a. That is definitely not a
But yeah,
lifetime
my comment
project.
was to the potential of what exists right now. That if such a meta myth is added, it it transforms everything
Yeah,
and
like
utilizes fully everything that's already there.
like in
It
the
doesn't need to arbitrarily be destroyed or wiped or put clean. Or,
right in the most ideal sense, if everybody quote unquote clicked to the model like this, what would happen is that nothing is going to be wiped out. Everything would be
Mhm.
repurposed
Right. And
as is.
the first instinct or intuition would be to keep doing what we're already doing. Nobody panic.
Yeah, like
Right.
we
That
still need the
obviously,
same.
that if we all everybody just got the idea like, well, this is our world, we should take care of it and each other all at once. The first idea would be to, okay, well, just stop, look around, what do it, and continue what you're doing. But let's start to modify through feedback
Like
what we
we're
have.
we're
Right?
talking about like the same ideas that immunity, the guild dynamics suggests, in that you start with education, the step back portion, then you work through the focus. What do you need to focus on, right? And facilitate immunity. Well, what does that look like in the real world? It surprisingly, it doesn't look like much. What it would entail is that imagine in the perfect world, everybody clicks, right?
Right.
Never gonna happen, but let's let's suppose for 2 seconds if it were
Mm-hmm.
healthcare. Get your sick workers up in their health. That immediately has uh, positive effects for the all of the operations that are ongoing. If you just switch to that one notion, build up the people. That's what it looks like. It doesn't look like a fucking grandiose shift in society where everybody becomes like a monk or something, totally connected with the world. No, it's like it looks like people now have more food. People, because we have the food to give to the people. Let's just people have more shelter because we have the shelter to give to the people.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like they're more happy and more productive to do whatever the fuck you're still doing because they're healthy and they're fed and they're warm and they're fucking happy and they don't worry about shit.
Right.
That's what it looks like. It doesn't look like a movement into a different world.
Right. Ian was just pointing out about
Yeah, I did miss that.
mythology of like professionalism and
Yeah.
worship of the authority figures.
So it's the new priest class because what do you defer decisions to? The person with the credentials.
Mm-hmm.
The doctor, the lawyer, we can't do our health, we can't do our law, we can't do our protection, we can't. You have to call the cops if somebody's attacking you.
Right. And with that, we're going to take a short break. Yeah. So yeah, that's a good point about professionalism and all that. Like when we're talking about what is myth, what is mythology, it might be easier to read it on.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The mythology, in fact, does establish your main
Like yeah,
characters
like
of
all this kind
mythology.
of trust the science type of stuff, like that idea.
Yeah. So
Trust
this
your
isn't.
politicians to run the government and rule you and all that.
So this isn't a direct feature of mythology per se. That should be understood. Mythology simply provides the avenue for that to become the reality that we accept. But not every mythology will build up an authoritative structure like this. In fact, the reason that they are built up like this is to justify the system itself. So it's
Right.
so there's no surprise there that the religious mythological narratives have all been twisted so badly to insinuate a form of authority, a form of sin, in some sense, and basically the whole you're indebted to society from the moment you're born. A funny comment I saw on Reddit recently is like, if scientifically it was found out that you do in fact reincarnate, how long do you think that credit companies will go after you after the moment you are reborn to apply the debt to you from your previous life? Like, it was in jest, but still, like the notion isn't that crazy towards the systematic thinking of this problem. So yeah, mythology definitely is the avenue through which authority structures are established. Um, However, mythology is a vehicle in this case, and it's the content of this vehicle that does the job, rather than the particular the fact of it being a mythology. Conversely, if you think about the model as being a counter mythology to that, it literally would essentially set out to do the opposite of it, to expose it, to put it in its place, so to speak, and assert where that sort of stuff belongs.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Reminds me of the idea of a perennial philosophy, although I don't know if that term is probably coded with
I don't know what that
some
means.
specific thing, but just I think based on just the words, I mean, seems to be like something that always returns, that returns again and again, kind of like an echo.
I'm gonna do myself a favor and actually look it up. Perennial philosophy, right?
Yeah. Reminded me of the notion of that, anyways, that there's kind of like something, like somehow people always end up returning to the same sorts of ideas. And I'm not talking about charlatanism.
Oh, it looks like it was a book by Huxley.
I didn't know that. Does that, is it, I wonder, is he saying it's a good thing? I don't know, maybe synopsis?
It is a perspective of philosophy and spirituality religious that views religious tradition as sharing a single metaphysical truth or origin from which all esoteric and exoteric
Yeah.
knowledge and doctrines has grown. Okay.
There you go. So, we're going to appropriate that.
Well, I suppose the model does have that feature, just based on the fact that it places dream, ontology, moment, and all of the interaction that pertains to all of this through the spectrum of stupidity, through the ideological arc, layers and upon layers of looking at it, for sure. It does seem to
Yeah.
dance with that
And
concept.
every mythological or religious spiritual system has its kind of niche and doesn't necessarily contain the whole or have all, like, even point to the meta myth. Like, that's the ideal, is that it should all kind of be able to connect through that kind of like single trunk.
I'll do you a technical favor by going through this
Okay,
my own way.
sure, go for it.
So the reason, sorry, let's be less qualitative and what do you call it? I'm not trying to make claims here, but it seems to me like the vast majority of mythology that we do end up accepting as truth to ourselves is derived from the bodily experiences that we all fundamentally go through. So what I mean by that is that the bits and pieces out of which all of these mythologies are put together, right, are derived from our common human experience. Like we all experience pain, we all experience pleasure, we all have a moment, we all have a dream, we all have an ontological matrix. All of these commonalities, right, are the bits and pieces out of which the mythologies that we create are composed of. So we don't have a way to get away from that experience. We can just pick and
There's
choose which ones we pay attention to more and more,
other things,
more or less.
there's an experience of hunger.
Right.
Everybody
Right,
out
sleeping.
there experiences hunger, so it's got to be somehow part of the myth.
And usually sight, talking, hearing, tasting, smelling, like all of this, it always comes up. Like the five senses always come up in the various mythological
Right, like
attributions.
why is there a hunter archetype or hero?
Is well, that's
Right.
that's a later invention. Like
What-
if
what
you,
is-
a hunter and a warrior and a fighter and any of those kinds of like what we would call an archetype is effectively a maturation of just the body, right? Because the body is responding
Yeah,
to,
that's
its, to its environment.
What I mean, all
so
I was
it's-
pointing to is like the point of that story is that we get hungry.
Oh, okay. I don't think I associate hunger with hunting directly. It's like one of the potential.
What would hunting be without hunger? Just a
No,
fun
I'm just thinking of
sport?
hungry goes like this. Well, if you think, yeah, in some ways, because if you
Do you
think
see what I'm
about,
saying though? If hunger didn't exist,
sure, yes,
where is the hunter?
yes, sure, that's
all.
true.
That's all I'm. trying
That's
to say.
true. That's true. I was like taking it into various situations in my head. One of which is like part of the hunt, for example, isn't hunger. Like because when your adrenaline is running, your
Yeah, sure, of course.
your whole digestive system is shut down.
Yeah.
So like there's different. It's
not
like
receiving
it's more like
attention.
cocaine rather than like the response, the bodily response is dopamine, right? It's not. Oh, I have logically have sequestered my need for nourishment. No, quenched. I had quenched my need for nourishment today. Like that your body doesn't say that, right? That's actually a
It does if there's an awkward silence after a meal.
It's a far more modern myth where it's like eating is something that you're supposed to earn to do, right? Like thinking like that.
Yeah. No. I didn't mean to like derail into a whole bunch of things. I just wanted to connect.
Oh no, that's just what I do.
Like where did your myth come from? It's
just-
connected to the body. This is where the perennial idea comes from.
yeah. Like
There is hunger.
taken that way, yeah. I have tried to make sure that I'm not debasing any of that. Just a few tangents. There's just a few random tangents in my head.
Well, we started late, so we have about another hour and a half, let's say.
Use it wisely.
Yeah, so that's why I keep trying to cut things to the chase. A little
Yeah,
bit.
well, we've gotten from narrative to ontological matrix on which the narrative has happened. We never really touched on the spectrum of stupidity, which is another layer.
Well, we did the quadrant
Right,
discussion.
right.
That's like the ways that we can be stupid.
And kept stupid.
And
Kept stupid. Because if we jump from quadrant to quadrant to quadrant to quadrant without a model of how we're jumping through the quadrants, and of course quadrants being a simplified variation of what thinking is, it's like a multidimensional spectrum altogether.
Mhm.
We didn't get into the ideological arc either.
And was that the lightning bolt? Remember
Yeah.
we did a zigzag.
That's it.
Yeah, I keep like earlier. I was wishing I could remember where to find this chart, but I don't think we ever added that.
Not that
to
one.
This.
No, it wouldn't.
That
have
would
been
be
there.
like just a lost image in the chat, I think.
Yeah, what you would need to picture is basically a 4-quadrant square right? And zigzag running from one square to the next, to the next, to the next. And it's kind of like a representative of what you gravitate most towards, second most towards, third and fourth in general. It's not like a personality test or anything to that effect. It's like a temperament. You're going to land in all of them. The question is that what drives you most, second most, third most, and the least. So if you're somebody like me, you're probably in the objectivistic side of everything, and the whole spiritual realm gets, the solipsistic realm gets regurgitated back into scientismic rhetoric, which is what we see me doing with the model.
So
We're in scientism land.
scientismistic, that would be objective was that kind of thing in both dimensions, the top left.
Yeah, strong objectivism. So Ayn Rand objectivism almost.
Why didn't we have this chart put anywhere or like written down,
I
or
don't
is
know.
it even in
I don't know.
the
I always-
glossary at all?
No, I think because this is my fault. Because some of
It's
these
nowhere.
Because some of these no, it's in my head is where it is.
No, but we charted it out though, but we never.
No, I don't think we did.
Oh yeah, we did.
Okay.
We did do that.
Okay, I don't remember.
It'd be a long time ago though.
The point of all of that, how do we tie that back to the chat? What happened in the chat? Well, that person's arc, the ideological arc, kept them at whatever like quadrant they were coming from for the entirety of their perspective. So, without seeing the other quadrants, without seeing that there are quadrants, without seeing that there is a spectrum, without seeing that that's where we're coming from in terms of our extrapolation, it seemed very important to this individual to play the word semantic game, which is a solipsistic trait.
We post a lot of pictures of flowers and soup. I'm never gonna find it, but I'm just.
It's me trying to get you guys
And
to
Portal
have
Mountain
good fucking food
logos.
in your bellies.
It's important.
Put food in your bellies, guys. My recipes are fucking delicious, man.
Chef Genia.
Fuck yeah. Do you know why I like to cook? Like my actual reason? When the person takes the first bite, that expression on their face,
And they don't. It doesn't scowl.
it never does that. No, like, it's like one of those you can't inhibit it smirks, like, oh, this just touched my tongue and I love it.
Nice-ish.
You'd be surprised how little it takes to improve a meal with a spice. Like, it's ridiculous. And nobody fucking talks about it except YouTube.
As they say,
Do you
spice.
need one?
Sure. Spice, not yet though.
No.
Spice is the spice of life.
Do you know sugar is a spice?
No.
It is. It's actually
it's sugar.
A proper spice when you were doing it. What's yours?
I don't need it open though. That's what I meant. Thanks.
Sorry. No, sugar is a proper spice. If you have something that is spicy, like heat spicy, sugar is what cuts the spice. So
Wonder-
it won't necessarily be sweet. It's just a matter of doing it right. I don't recommend sprinkling sugar on everything.
Oh wait, this has got to be way too far back.
It's
Sorry.
I don't think we've made an image here.
2021.
Yeah, I don't think we made an image for that. So sorry about that. I can.
We did.
It's not a problem. It's literally a 4-quadrant picture with a zigzag going through it. So you just need to remember what the quadrants are for. the way I picture this in my head, so that we're aligned, is that objectivism to the left and to the top, solipsism to the right and to the bottom. So on the left hand side at the top, you have objectivism overlapping with objectivism. That gives us scientism. You go lower on the right, so right first, top bottom, left right is first, top
Yeah,
bottom
that's what
is
I was
second.
wondering. What are the dimensions? Because there's a top, bottom, and there's a left and right.
So primary dimension is the left right,
Between what?
solipsism and objectivism.
Objectivism on the left and
Yes.
solipsism on the right.
Correct.
Then it divided again.
Top bottom with the same terminology. Objectivism on the top, objectivism on solipsism on the bottom.
Right. So it's saying, wait, we've broken this down
So
two before,
top
like
left. That's different. That's abstract and
the
concrete. I think.
reason, the reasoning for it being like that, like each dimensional slice taken in order is because of cognitive facilities.
Yeah, the abstract,
Some
the
sort.
gravitation towards the abstract, gravitation towards the concrete.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Concrete being
And
the more
then-
solipsistic side.
And then it's like within that, there's a sub choice of how to project or something like that.
Right, because it's not like you're only ever objectivism. If you are, that's an extreme. Most people will land somewhere in the middle,
Right.
which is either objectivism colored by solipsism, or conversely, solipsism colored by objectivism. The former, when you're mostly objective and you have some solipsistic, you go into philosophy. The latter,
Bet it's on my hard drive.
could be,
Although, sorry.
with the latter, you start solipsistic, but you have an objectivistic coloring. That's religious. That's what is meant by religious versus philosophical versus spiritualist, which is solipsism all the way. And
Right.
none of this is inherently bad. There's like no this is the correct way. You have to mix and match. No, this is just a disposition. This is where the arcs are gravitating towards. The ideological arc.
Mm-hmm.
For some people, it's just like it's so strongly in just one quadrant that it's impossible to speak to them through through any language that comes from the other ones. So, some people you have to talk to in terms of professionals, other people you have to talk to in terms of priests,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like they won't allow the mythology to renegotiate the meaning of certain words. The mythology is the same. It's just the words being used to color the same story is different. Priest versus professional. The mythology is the same. The labels given the actors are different. The myth is the same. It's just talking a different language, basically.
Same function.
Exactly the same function, just different language. It's like Russian and Hebrew and English and French and Spanish and any language. So everything is that being said is the human experience, but it's said. But in French you say I call myself.
Mm-hmm.
In Russian you say they call me.
Je m'appelle.
Je m'appelle means I call myself. In Russian, меня зовут means they call me. And in English is my name is. So same phrase, but very different words. Just the language is different. The myth is the same.
Right.
That applies throughout people's thinking too.
Yeah, and I was looking. I thought I could find it, but I couldn't. I remember. I'm pretty sure you would probably remember it too, Jan. It was like just I think like a black cross and like labels, but then there was like this lightning bolt. Like I drew like an actual
Yeah, I can't.
colored in
For the
yellow. I
life
think
of
it was
me.
a paint. It was like paint, like MS Paint,
Okay.
right?
I don't recall it. Like I'm
That
trying
never
to.
became canonized, if you will.
Oh, it's canonized, but it's been a mental image for me since forever.
Yeah.
And I do apologize for just assuming everybody gets it.
Right. So spectrum of stupidity. Yeah, it's just been so long. Like I kind of wish we had material to like refresh on and that kind of stuff.
So, shall we discuss what the effects are due to sticking to the spectrum of stupidity with the obfuscation that occurs in the mythological narrative? Like, what's going on there? Why is this so problematic? Like, any of that stuff.
Right. Okay. So we have myths being uptaken, being a social thing, like memes sort of spreading. Um, and
So,
we need to get to this point where it's like there's the meta myth or whatever, right?
I'm about to get on the insulting side of things.
Right. It's something that doesn't happen that should be happening. So when you take on this myth and you reify it, in other words, take it like a realism as a realism.
The truth, quote unquote.
So you uptake the myth, or however you want to say. When that myth happens to reflect too closely, or I don't know, like it gets mistaken for this is what this myth is saying something about the world around me, and now I need to judge the objects that I'm seeing in my vision according to this myth. You are that. You are that.
Yeah.
Which
yeah.
is not the point of myth
Right.
in its proper form if you take the meta myth up.
Right.
That's the arc we need to, I think.
So what you're saying
line
that
up.
what you're saying there is what I would be calling getting stuck onto the spectrum, not being able to jump out of it.
Mhm.
And I'm just trying to like work through
Right.
what that is.
And one of the purposes of the
and how
spectrum
that's
is
different from what you're
is
saying.
to be able to lay out the kind of vastly different ways that people appear to be making the same mistake.
Yeah.
And it appears different, but it's really kind of
So,
the same sort of mechanic happening.
So here's where we introduce our own mythology, if you will, and this is where it's like less than flattering. And the terminology that we've been using is retardation, stupidity, and idiot. Now, why?
Terms.
Yeah. Why? Because we are not trying to make anybody very comfortable in that scenario, because nobody should be, and they haven't been already to begin with if they've gotten this far to understanding the model. Like, what are they trying to figure out if not the fuckery of the mental states that they're in?
Right. So you want to outline a few terms.
It's terms that should not sit comfortably with anybody, but terms that I apply to myself just the same. And I've said that outright earlier today in the chat.
Proceed.
So retardation speaks to not the traditional state clinical term that has been used, but rather the slowing down of the mental faculties that are caused by the obfuscation of the system. So, in other words, we are all being retarded by the system. That's the way to really take it. That there is an extrinsic force that is retarding us, making us less than what we are. That's why I use the word, because I don't want anybody to feel any kind of comfort or like this is for them. This isn't for them. It's to literally retard them.
And you could see
Slow
that
their
as
mental
being
faculties.
caused by like a market force
Right.
to profit off of stuff.
So
Simple as that.
So that's point one. This retardation, as a consequence, has us hopping around the spectrum of stupidity constantly.
A retarded customer is a good customer.
Basically, if
As
they
they say in the
can't
industry.
think, if they don't think, they don't. We think for them. That's what you want if you're exploiting.
Right. Pulling fast ones.
The second
The
term.
slower they are, the better. when you're
Second
pulling
term is
fast
the
ones.
stupidity. What makes us stupid, or rather stupefied, would be the more appropriate way to think of it. What stupefies us is the pull of the system being, first of all, is that much larger than us. Second of all, constantly switching contexts between us using obfuscation, it makes us jump from objective positions to philosophical positions to religious positions to spiritual positions. Over and over and over, the cycle goes on and 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 on. It's like chasing your own tail.
Right.
This doesn't solve it, that doesn't solve it, that doesn't solve it, this doesn't solve it. Together they solve nothing. That doesn't solve it, this doesn't solve it. And on it goes. But you're made to feel good about this, you're made to feel good about that. That's the function of the 33 myths. Jump into this quadrant, jump into that quadrant. Ask the professional, ask your priest, ask this. Defer.
Right. And these are the ways that appear different, as I was saying earlier, with the same underlying functionality, the broken feedback loop between neurochemical map and its environment.
So we are being retarded by the system, remaining in the stupidity spectrum, stupefying ourselves. We're not stupid people, we are stupefied people. We are not retards, we are being retarded by an extrinsic force. And finally, the worst is the idiot. Now, that is a word that I specifically chose for a very particular type of reaction.
Pardon?
For the realization of the model and the turning away from it. So, if you are there long enough to realize that there is a spectrum of stupidity, that you're being retarded by the system, and yet you choose the spectrum of stupidity and being retarded by the system, you're an idiot. To take it back a little, I'm an idiot. That's to qualify everything.
I think we need to work on this one.
I am a retarded, stupid idiot.
Don't you mean you are idioting? You are being idioted.
Well,
there's got to be some way to make it nicer.
It's yeah, sure. I mean, you can look at it this way, but I've tried to like really wrap it up into this context so that it's really clear.
Does that really
what idiot
fit?
what
Like,
it does?
Is it important to talk about that? And isn't there other terms? What are those? What would you call? Like, this is the most dangerous charlatan is the callous, right? This is what we're getting at.
I think it's fair to like put it up to the lot of us to like really think of these terms, but remember that I don't get challenged a lot for my term choice, so it's either this or no term right now. We are absolutely free to make it less. So like, but I still don't want to make it. I don't want to make it
like
comfortable.
These three. I don't know if we put these three terms. It's not a triad. Is it? Like we haven't. It's just arbitrarily being slown by an extrinsic system.
Yeah, that's one.
Being retarded. And what was
by another element. That's
term,
the very
okay. Next term and
stupid is being literally. Stuck to the spectrum of stupidity, so jumping from quadrant to quadrant to quadrant, never escaping scientism, never escaping philosophy, never escaping religious, and never escaping spiritualistic thoughts.
Broken feedback, I called it. And then idiot,
or positive feedback,
being an idiot. Sure, yeah, breaking, of which breaking would be good.
An idiot.
Why are these three put together? Why do you arbitrarily want to clump these three things into some set?
Because an idiot is determined by the choice for stupidity. They see that it is stupid, as it were, that it's retarding, as it were, and still choose it, go into it, still make those decisions, given that. Making the systemic decisions above the model one. That's where I step back and say, hold on, guys, I'm an idiot.
We're getting.
I am.
I feel
like so. This is not a question of like calling anybody anything.
Degrees of coherence and hostilities discussion.
Yeah, you could call an idiot to be a hostility element towards coherence, like.
Yeah,
That's what.
and we
That's
called
what.
it callous before. Why
That,
is
no,
it now idiot or something?
oh
You
no
know
no
what I
no.
mean?
So a
This
call.
I must be connecting these ideas for some reason.
Callousness would be like your most extreme idiot
Okay,
because they recognize it and they just don't give a flying
that's.
fuck.
But we've given the same definition for both things.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
why are we making a new term?
Because it probably came from different orientation.
I'm just trying to normalize these three. Why you pick these three out? So I've almost knocked one off that it's already somewhere else.
So
So
that
stupid, retarded, stupid, retard. That's two. That's good.
like I think we're talking about like
Stupid, hostile, retards.
why things are happening and then the what happens. So the why is the retardation, the stupidity, and the idiocy. That's the why. And the what is like your callous, your adversarial, and your not hostile. What, there was a third one. I forget now. So I think they're relating. I don't think they're relating one to one. I think like the stupidity with retardation and idiocy is like its own full package that they always go hand in
Idiocy
hand.
just seems like hostility to me.
Idiocy is hostile, and specifically because it's like recognizing the model and then also just going, you know what, I'm going to
Eon
do
just got censored for trying to say the R word, trying to type it out. It wouldn't.
R word.
YouTube. Yeah. Retarding.
Yeah, controversial wording. Again, I'm open to suggestions. I just haven't had a good replacement word. I do
Well, we
understand.
specifically appropriated
I
that.
do understand it where it might come off as.
The trick is to not even say retard as a noun.
Right.
Because it's a
process.
process
Yeah.
of retardation. To be
Happening to you.
To be retarded isn't that you are a retard. It's that something is retarding you. That's what it is.
Yes.
To be a retard. To be
Yes.
retarded. See, I just broke it again.
Good job, man. Yeah.
We'll get this.
The strongest reason for any of these choices is I don't want anyone sitting comfortably thinking to themselves, I'm a retard, I'm stupid, I'm an idiot, and like be okay with it. I call myself these things because I'm not okay with it.
No, we're actively breaking a myth by replacing it with other stuff.
And it is very unfortunate that the initial terms were chosen by the medical community who was anything but wise to what the fuck they were doing.
Right. They're just slow at life.
Right?
Anyways, we'll take a short break. Be right back. All right. We're kind of back.
So, here's the gotcha. We've just spent a few minutes solidly trying to justify the usage of the word retarded, right?
Retarding. Yes,
Retarding,
retarded.
Retarded, all of the things.
As a post tense noun.
So the
or
question,
verb.
yeah. So the question arises: how is this different from, say, the anti-Semitic commentary made earlier in the chat, and how that differs, say, from what we're doing right now?
Okay.
How do we get on the high horse here and brush that off?
Right. How is?
And I'm framing this to be like, contrarian, like aha, gotcha.
Right. Now we're just given terms here. We're just defining a bunch of terms. How do you distinguish between those terms of like retarding, idiot, all that kind of stuff,
Without falling into the same boat.
Well, without falling, but also just stepping back more basically, distinguish that between a myth. What is the myth here?
I mean,
what is the story?
I think I think you're catching my drift for sure.
I just want to iterate. If we've defined, then what is the story in which these definitions exist or interplay?
That was not present in this individual's exposition. They just like flat out said, So if we were to talk about model with somebody who's a stranger, does it make any kind of fucking sense to start talking about idiocy or retardation or any of that stuff?
So the overarching myth that we're using here again is Portal Mountain, as we've said before, the model, whatever you will, that
lays
this is what's happening. There's a being, a neurochemical map going through space, time, etc. You may observe it.
So I asked this question because I just realized that, wait a minute, if we're not careful, like, that's the same we stand to get this exact same accusation by picking on specifically my choice of a term, right? That could be seen as like the fiasco that we just seen, and like, so what the fuck makes any of this different, and is it different? Well, number one, I'm willing to replace the terms. Like, if you have better terms,
there's that.
We'll go for that. Number two, laying out the model before using the terminology to illustrate what the specific terms are pointing at in that model, not the actual specific, like actually explaining
the
what
reverse.
the
Reverse way would be to just start using the term
and then make people guess
how you think it is, or what the real way of using the term is, even though it's totally different from what's being expected by your listeners. Which that to me is like totally ingenuine way to proceed, right?
Like basically laying down zero of the groundwork to even being able to introduce said term
now,
in a way
time,
that makes sense.
This could be a temperament thing as well. So there's something more to it that's missing, because that could be a valid way of initiation, if you will.
Sure.
Right? You don't always have to give the academic model before utilization in situation.
Well, that's not what I meant. I meant laying
I'm just filling out the scenario here, the context.
Yeah.
Right?
On the one hand, yes, you could.
We do have lots of ways that potentially could be done.
On the one hand, you could definitely lay out the model, speaking like the ontological matrix, all of the different dreams stuff, the spectrum of stupidity
That'd be
itself.
more academic side,
right?
And I was thinking on on the perceptive side,
right? Yeah, me too.
Where you just jump into action and you use your body to be that.
To put the experience back together from the bigger pieces.
You be the model.
That's all fair. Yeah, that's exactly what the. That's exactly what the problem is.
And so that could, the way that person appeared could be a legitimate way to appear, but it's very dangerously, and I mentioned it in chat, confused with charlatanism, for rightly so, right? People
Well, I wouldn't even say
sniff that out.
confused. I wouldn't say confused because even from the perceptive perspective,
I'm saying if he had
model would have to come up.
if he had a tight, if he was like
Yeah.
expressing model, then that's
Because the distinguishing factor of the perceptive, the distinguishing attribute of the perspective, is effectively that they're able to combine academic, pragmatic, and devotional together into one coherent package. So if you are looking at no academic, no pragmatic, and no hint of the devotional, that is not the perceptive that we're looking for because the model is missing. So they could have very well be perceptive but not model, like not cognitive of model,
right. That's
because those
yeah,
have to show up.
that's what I mean.
Even
So
though the model has to show up in the academic
so like
sense too.
I don't want to attack the presentation, is what I mean.
Sure. Yes, I agree with that. But the content lacked
Right.
the necessary bits.
Like the cockiness and all that, like the pride and this type of presentation. It could, I mean, you could act it out. It could be part. It could be an act. The world's a stage. It's a play, right?
But if you're a perceptive and the world is a stage and you're acting out, if you ignore the other person's arc, right, the act is neither here nor there. It doesn't speak to anything.
Yeah, and you're talking about the
Like-
perceptive method, whatever.
The perceptive method is a very personal, one-on-one
What's it called?
temperament.
The perceptive method. One of them. I
Oh,
think there was two, or maybe there's just one.
There's just one.
the
That's the
ideal,
arc.
the ideal method,
Yeah, ideological arc.
and that's the taking on of the master
Yeah.
identity role.
And at that point, you have to recognize your quote-unquote students or whatever we've termed that.
It's
as
dependent on the student's arc.
arc. If you
Right.
don't take on that arc, you're just talking into the fucking.
Mm-hmm.
You're just farting into
Complete
the wind,
mismatch.
basically.
Yeah. It almost implies a grand mastery. That's kind of interesting. That to do the ideal method properly.
Well, perceptive does line up with that coherence in one of the schemes.
So yeah, not easy. Let's say
Yeah,
not simple.
it's like it's the hardest approach actually. So to do it willy-nilly like this and just throw terminology around, like it would be a mistake for us to do the same thing. Like if we
Right.
took somebody who is, I don't know, devotional, we're not going to talk about stupidity and and what retardation is and what idiocy is. Those are like those concepts are not on that same ground skill level. Like it's not appropriate for that situation whatsoever.
Right.
Um,
And we would be more describing the hero to be emulated, sort of thing.
right, right. Like the traits and virtues, if you will, that do not have that contained within them. Right, like it's kind of like, well, these are not the hobbies of your archetype that you're aiming for.
Right.
So if you have this archetype you're aiming for, those are not the hobbies.
Right.
Emulate the hobbies of the archetype. That's the correct path. That's very devotional
Mm-hmm.
and very simple, and it doesn't need to make you feel stupid.
Right.
You only need to feel stupid if you feel very, very clever.
But I think, like, maybe
That's my
civilization
vote.
is trying to upgrade or something, but, like, the way that people think, you almost need a meta myth to unpack the usage of this, let's call it basic
Environment.
mythology.
Well, first of all, the mythology has to reflect the environment. And
Right. That's what I'm saying. The environment has advanced. That's what I mean by the civilizational mind
and
is...
ancient mythology doesn't keep up very well.
Right. But at the same time, it's just packages and layers, so that same exact mythology just needs a new container or context type of
That's the point of
Right.
making the model. That's supposed to be one of the possible containers for it.
Hmm.
And the fact that it doesn't rely on inventing anything new is pretty cool, I would say.
And that it's a lot of just recycled Buddhism.
It it all is. Like I can't see a single piece of it that isn't like
Well,
everything we've said is like what Buddhism's saying too.
I mean,
So I
that
can't-
that's great, of course, but
It's-
we definitely go into ideas and niches of application, especially that
Didn't
Are-
didn't
are
appear in the
not-
Buddhist canon.
wouldn't have been thought of while
Yeah.
writing that.
Yeah, and I mean we're talking about a situation in which people had no idea what computers even were or possible, trying to describe an operating system.
Even the schools, as we view them through the model, they didn't have that self awareness as schools among schools at different layerings. That, by and large,
Not the way I framed it. No.
I'm guessing.
The way I framed it also follow historicity. So you have the quote-unquote original academic style of Buddhism, which is just people talking around campfires, basically, exchanging information about the ins and outs of the model, right? About
Mhm.
like what this
Oral
means,
tradition, typically held in song and that
what-
kind of stuff.
what's in
or
the
a verse.
moment, but also the content of it, like the operating system. So it became like this. Eventually, after all of the oral
Of
stuff,
course, man. How many of our
stuff
ancestors were
propagated.
there sitting thinking like, dude, how the fuck did I just get here? Does anybody else have this question? When you're in a civilization and there's
Remember, I
thousands
said
of-
that this is another myth you've learned
thousands.
to believe in.
You know what I mean. I'm just trying to point
Like,
to
the importance
a
of the-
backwards time flow.
Did you know that the importance of this question is not universal? Like there
What
are still
question?
like, how did I get here? Who am I? And all of that stuff. Like there
Oh,
are, there are
yeah.
still
I'm just
tribes
pointing
that
to the
don't-
pop-out point where you're like, become self-referential. That's what I was trying to allude to.
Yeah.
Not the question
it-
itself being important. Who am I in this place?
If you think about it, it comes together. It comes packaged together with the myth of the individual. Like if you hold the belief that you are an individual,
Yeah. So
the
separate
the questions of where I come from
How did
become
you just
more
pop
irrelevant.
out?
Yeah.
into this out of nowhere,
So even that is
out of
guided by.
nothing.
So even that might seem like a natural question to you, but actually it's guided by a mythology you've come to believe to take as real, a story you've taken as a truth.
Yeah. So this is back. We're right back to the intro of the
Yeah.
video.
Yeah, and it's
The
fine.
stream.
This isn't a bug. Like that. This is the important thing to understand here. It's not a bug. This is a feature. That is a feature of a neurochemical AI walking the planet. Like, it's just adapting to the things that it's encountering and reflecting them back into itself and back out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
Said reflection gets reflected
Yeah.
back into the world.
Right. Yeah. We're obviously on the chain or the stream of these campfire sitters who have that pop, have self-awareness, and share or attempt to share that with each other.
So historically, Buddhism goes from the personal experience to the global experience, and this is where you have the switch from what is normally called Theravada or Hinayana or whatever those earlier Buddhist terms are. I don't like Hinayana because it suggests that there's a lower vehicle and a higher vehicle. To understand that properly, it's
Isn't it just
not for
saying
the lay-
abstract instead of concrete?
Right.
It's abstract, which is
Basically.
higher. Okay.
So instead of being like a focus on the Buddha as a man living his life and then dying, it became like a global Buddhism. What is the Buddha in a cosmological sense? So the story became cosmological, and Hinayana kind of like grew into this
Right,
huge
but naturally-
tapestry of
naturally so.
cosmic powers.
Because this is that type of myth that bookends your whole existence and what you actively and constantly uptake as real.
And then from that whole bigger quote unquote cosmic mythology, a specific archetype was selected to be like the most perfect representation of Buddhahood. Amitabha became the exemplar archetype for the devotional specialization of Buddhism that came because of that. So you had to have the Mahayana growth of the cosmology to arrive at this cosmic Buddha Amitabha, which everybody now is aspiring to be like in the Pure Land Buddhism. Right,
And
that's the role model.
Devotional temperament.
Right. So you see, even historically speaking, you have like the academic element, then expounded into the pragmatic element of like what it all means, and then finally you have a third layer on top of that is like what are the archetypes within that world that I need to follow to achieve the things that are being spoken about in all of these great myths. And each one offers a different view of the same thing, right? One is offering it like what does it look like pragmatically for yourself, and right now like just academically do it. Pragmatic and academic is kind of interlaced here, because there's the pragmatic practice and why you're doing it. That's the academic part, but that's very esoteric, if you will, very Buddhist specific. Then you have your cosmology, which is much more generic and much more elaborate and appeals to much more.
Were you talking about Zen?
Yeah, Zen, Chan, Mahayana in general is about the cosmology, and Chan and Zen and all, they all follow that. Even Vajrayana at the end. And so does Pure Land. And then Pure Land develops out of that because it needed the cosmology to exist before it could do that. You needed to have a cosmological Buddha to have as an archetype before you can have the archetypes. So you needed a cosmology, so you needed the archetypes. So Mahayana filled that role. So the temperaments follow this very particular structure that actually got elaborated upon historically.
Right. That's the way that that's a lens that you could say we use, I guess, to guide our view of history.
Funnily enough, it developed at first independently, and then it was more like realized that we're following that trajectory, and then we took that as a hell's yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We're on the right track here. Can I see the lighter?
Right. So
and it developed like that way naturally too. So it's like not so much an accident as it is probably a repetition.
Isn't Mahayana is called both sometimes, the Zen and Pure Land. That's what, did you say Pure Land?
Yeah. So Mahayana will have Zen in it. It will have Pure Land in it, and it will have the Tibetan stuff.
If you look from the model perspective, that even like the neurochemical OS layers, starting at like mimetic. The archetype mimetic, that's your Theravada academic, lines up with that. Then you can jump up, and you've got the two like the eye chart. Yeah. Those who will know the eye chart, the two inner temperaments. You've got jumping up the pragmatic and the devotional.
Yeah.
Those two together, one being pragmatic, being the ontology, and the devotional being more this narrative. Ongoing narrative, right? So those two together as pure Zen, Chan being the abstract, and Pure Land.
Chan is the Chinese name, Zen is the Japanese name.
Right. I always just said Zen, but
they're kind of different, but that's because China and Japan are different.
So point being, going up the neurochemical OS layers.
There's also Korean one.
We've gone through abstract, that's the Zen, to concrete, the Pure Land, and then Vajrayana,
which is like
narrative,
which is like a
layer.
Yeah, Vajrayana is like a very odd one in this regard because it kind of just like takes what it needs from every layer before that. So it will mix the academic stuff with the cosmological stuff, with the devotional stuff, and create a picture that is very unique to whatever whoever the person is, based on that arc that I've been mentioning.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of neat that we were able to
that's what.
look at the ideal method a bit today, and especially in relation to all this.
So what's really cool about that is that the historical development of every Buddhism type, if you will call it that, follows the same arc and trajectory that we had in developing our own model.
Yeah.
And we didn't even try to do that. We only realized it after the fact.
Right.
Specifically, which temperament we tackle first, second, third, and fourth.
Yeah, it's like a
That never occurred to me.
It's
to
like
do
a
it in that order.
histology of sort, I guess, like knowing preconditions for something
It's
to
repeating
later.
itself.
Right.
It's a karmic cycle. There is the same causes and condition perform the
Right.
same.
But we didn't have
outcomes.
to dig up a temple to think about that. Right.
No. It basically happened
Temple
naturally.
was here already.
It happened on its own naturally. Like, I made the mistake of kind of saying like I feel more like an antenna at one point, and after the fact I realized that this is the kind
Yeah.
of rhetoric the charlatans tend to use.
Right.
And I'm like, oh fuck, that's not what I meant.
Not to mention your
Like, I don't feel like I own these ideas. Though.
third rock from the sun.
Like, I have zero claim on the
Incoming
idea.
transmission from the big giant head.
It's neat though.
Yeah.
It's neat though. But also, it's funny how like, all of these roads still lead to the most mythological element. Like with Buddhism, it was Vajrayana. With the model, it became the perceptive. And even now, when we're talking about what the fuck happened in our chat room, it has to do with the fact that there was an obfuscated mythology that's going on and caused this person to... Well, it's hard to really know what a stranger is really thinking. I don't know this person that well.
And this is also a direct consequence of the obfuscation, is that everybody's obfuscated in their own ways.
Yeah.
From their own completely unique experience, right?
So, yeah, so if I were to give them the most benefit of the doubt, let's pretend they have no fucking clue what anti-Semitism actually is, and they're just using that word because it's edgelordy
Or
and
let's
whatever
say
the fuck that is.
they don't know how they don't know what types of things are normally categorized by most people as anti-Semitism. That's the leap that's really hard for me to swallow.
They did seem
as
to
being,
recognize that. They seem to be
as being genuine. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the leap. What I don't
Good
understand
faith.
is that they already know that it's used this way, and then yet they're still insisting on doing it the other
Applying the label to themselves when they know
Yeah.
what types of things the label is usually applied
without
to.
any of the usual setup that would be required.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
So, let's give the most benefit of the doubt as I can, as somebody with an Israeli citizenship who has been in the place in question and has, I don't know, ties to the identity in question and how all of that. First of all,
Yeah, so you can be singled out, targeted, or whatever as
here's
by the ideology, and this is the problem. right?
Here's the biggest problem that I'm facing.
This person is a
Personally.
proud anti-Semite
Let's examine
by
this.
their own words.
Let's
So
examine
let's
this
just
from
put
my
that
point of view.
context there, and then you don't really have to say a lot.
So let's put this from my perspective, from my point of view, as what they quote unquote call a Jew. Number one, do you know how I know I'm a Jew?
Mother was.
I was told. You're a Jew. End of story. That's it.
There you
like
go.
My capacity for being labeled a Jew or not has nothing to do with who I am.
Began as soon as you could remember.
Right.
Was told to you. Okay, yeah. No, and that's the point.
Number
and this
one.
is the break. This is the disconnect because that isn't being seen when the feedback loop is broken.
Number two, There is a mythology about Jews that has nothing to do with me, made up by other people. So, put
I
those
think
two things together
I hope we have
for
time
just 2 seconds.
to
Just
get into this.
put this conundrum into together. I'm being told I'm a Jew, and I'm being told I am this, that, the other thing, this, the other thing.
That Jews are this and that,
Yes.
right? And that he has a lot of hope for you that you can get better, and you'll be better someday as a race.
At
you
what?
Like you.
Shitting? Making my pelmeni?
He just wants
What?
he wants to help you. Right?
It's
See, and this is the problem. I'm kind of pointing it out how stupid it is.
Yeah, like,
you, he doesn't know a shit about you.
I was told I'm a Jew. The entire world set itself up to, I don't know, allow me to go to Israel and whatever and get that citizenship that I got at 7 years fucking old.
Mm-hmm.
What aspect of this did I actually engage in?
Right. So this is an example of the disconnect, because then what does this person actually have to
What is it suggesting to me? Like,
teach you or
yeah.
do to you now?
So now he comes to me as an
So
anti-Semite.
he wanted to latch on to this. Oh yeah, that my gut instinct was right, that you're a Jew, right? And it's like, but now you have to be treated according to the ideology is running, right? That's what I told him, like, have fun with your ideology, when right before I went to bed, that chat storm, I guess.
So, back to the topic at hand, I guess. When you have like such a strong mythology, and you encounter an actual individual from the perspective of living on this fucking planet, somebody who has no say in whether or not I am actually
So this has
Jewish
got
or
to be
not,
a
like
specific.
any of those things.
This has got to be a type of mythology where you categorize people. It's like a political mythology.
We've talked about categories early on in our model.
But all mythology involves categories. This is a political mythology when you're categorizing types of like factions.
And by political, you mean systemic, because
Right.
that's literally all that is.
Okay. I just wanted to.
It's very hard to like express it in a way that doesn't make me sound like I'm actually angry, because anger is not why I even care.
Right.
I care because
Oh,
there's bullets flying.
you're triggered. You're
Well,
just
there's bullets
you're
flying.
just butthurt.
Like, seriously, I've heard the fucking firefights. I have people on my Facebook right now who I am friends with still since I was 16 years old, just before meeting you, who are in the army. Because
Yeah.
military service is,
Well, again, so
is required.
everybody on this earth can be categorized as a type of people or person based on where they grew up. Everybody had a history, and everybody can be judged and shamed based on how their life came up. It has nothing to do with them in context. That's the point.
Yeah.
So to broaden this, it's not just about you as being a certain type. It's about everybody is all kinds of certain types, according to the ontological matrix.
So what's the difference between using anti-Semite and retard?
Maybe we'll get into that. But before we do, be right back.
Mute.
Wait,
For
wait,
2 seconds.
hold
2
on.
seconds. Mute.
That would be rude. To come back like that.
Yeah. So I just left.
Clickety clack.
I just left with a question of asking, what's the difference between, again, using anti-Semite versus the word retard or retarding or stupid
To
or idiot.
retard.
Yeah. The answer is actually really, really basic and simple. It's just ridiculous. Are we anti-retardation? Model speak wise?
No, just a
It
fact.
it just happens.
It's
what happens.
That's what it is.
Are we anti stupidity? Same question, same answer basically. You see what I'm getting at, right? Are we anti-idiocy? No. None of these things are actually something we're anti against or things that we look down upon.
Well, the story I would give is
they're
that
uncomfortable consequences.
there are people born every day, new, fresh into this world, bound to make the exact same mistakes over and over again. That doesn't mean that
ignorance is not stupidity, but okay. Because stupidity requires the mythological part. You have to believe in things to begin with.
The ignorance is going to lead that way.
Yes, that's the key. That's the correct connection, I guess. I'm just picky.
Right. So it's a normal path through. That's what I'm trying to say. Is there's always going to be this, that, the other.
I'm being picky.
It's not that we need a war on stupidity.
Or retarding or idiocy. Those are just
we don't have
facts
to
of life.
fight the system to do the war on stupidity, on retarding.
In fact, the entire core purpose of talking about the dream is to discuss the idea of the regrets of the past, the anxieties for the future, and how those can lock one into that kind of pattern. Right? Like those are the mechanisms behind why that happens. So we're not even talking about like blame of people of like, hey, you're responsible for this,
Well,
for this stupidity or this retardation.
I feel like it's a bit of an advantage to be provocative in a term because it invites a definitional sort of coming to terms when it's used, right?
In one way. And again, the primary motivation for choosing such obnoxious words were to instill the sense of discomfort in oneself.
Right.
Not calling other people retards, not calling other people stupid, or calling other people idiots. I'm retarded. I am stupid. I am being an idiot. Choosing to be an idiot over and over and over again. It's meant to be like a discomfort place for oneself. Not to like get depressed over it either. Don't get me wrong. Just not be comfortable in that seat.
Yeah, we're all retarded.
Yeah, like don't worry about
system.
Don't worry about it. Nobody's getting out of it unscathed.
Actually, it's like sort of a meta-mythological warfare to appropriate stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Could be.
Just take it completely out of the domain of people affected by certain physical conditions or whatever, right? It has nothing to do with that. It's the system.
Yeah. I think we're far enough from...
It's what the system does.
We're already, like, timeline-wise, historically-wise, we're far enough from these terms being used in medical settings that we can actually repurpose them.
Yeah. Why just let the good words languish?
And repurpose them not for the purpose of diminishing...
I hate being retarded.
Yeah. It's not comfortable.
It sucks.
It's not comfortable to feel like an idiot all the time. It shouldn't be.
Right.
And we do feel like an idiot because we do know that our bodies are demanding different things from the things that we're giving it. We feel that. We feel stupid. We feel... That's the negative dukkha that Buddhism is talking about.
Right,
We're not talking about like... it's the dissatisfactoriness of experience in and of itself.
Now, how far are we from anti-Semite right now? Because those are model terms and anti-Semite would be a term in, let's say, this person's model of cosmos, right? That's what the
It's just such an
myth
arbitrary
feels
category.
like.
Yeah, it's just such
This
an
wall of
arbitrary
myth.
category that doesn't
Um,
pertain to not only does it not pertain to real living, breathing human beings, but the way it ends up pertaining to them after the fact of being, what do you call it?
so it ends up
Hyper-narrative.
being a systemic mythology.
It ends up being a systemic repression of Jews for being a character in the story. And anybody who happens to carry that label is being integrated into that story with or without their um, con- any kind of consent, if you want to call it that. I think it's a little stronger than consent at that point. It's
Mhm.
it's enslavement into the myth.
Yeah, so here's a problem with the modern mind or sensibilities, um, with the scientism type of stuff,
If it's written, it's written.
and appropriation of mythology, of what myth is. Um, People can't come to believe stories from a Bible or from anything because they're just old-timey historical things that probably never happened, right? The myths, the Greek myths, like think of the gods and the pantheons. And
Beliefs is not the word I would want to use.
okay,
For a different
without
reason.
picking it out,
Tangent warning right there.
um,
But yes,
there's a problem with that myth is all taken as story, including like the idea of religion and all that kind of stuff. Story being untrue. Um,
if it exists squarely in the mind, it is not in the materialistic world, so to speak. You can't extract dollar values from it.
so it's like the only myths that are taken up are materialistic, in some sense.
Which
Do you know what I mean?
I do, I do. Darren also spoke to this, and there was a shift due to the Industrial Revolution on that subject because
Makes sense.
it suddenly became much more lucrative to be clever. I'm using that word as a different word from smart. There's technically clever, right? That we are, as a species, and technically incredibly clever. That doesn't mean we're smart.
So clever way of divorcing the kind of intuitive, self-referential stream of life from
Being able
a
to
purely technological
Yeah.
gimmick.
Being able to solve technical problems,
Right.
which we're great at. I'm not denying that whatsoever. But clever does not mean all here, in any sense. It's literally being clever, and that's why I keep using that term, because it doesn't paint. You can be clever and mischievous, right? Like there is no benevolence to it.
But I'm
It's its
saying
own
that
thing.
this is a challenge because
Well, it's not a
you
problem.
can't present a story type myth of somebody who was amazing who existed in the past and you should be just like him. You
Right.
can't do that to this population, which is really kind of wild. If our talking about like devotional being the majority temperament, most people are ready to follow a hero. That's how they would
Right, it would
learn
have-
how to do things in the world. Yet hero stories and all this, they don't really exist, like Marvel movies and all that. Maybe I don't know.
So Marvel.
There's a new pantheon and all this stuff, but it's obfuscated, right? It's gonna be.
Something to note about the heroes that are portrayed in things like Marvel movies
I
is
didn't
that
mean for that tangent, but
there's a difference. There's a different understanding of hero.
I'm just saying you can't rely on any of this.
So the hero's journey that, for example, that we're talking about, and the heroes portrayed by Marvel are totally different entities altogether, and that's what I'm just trying to touch a little bit of base on that. If you note in their story arcs, the people that they tend to stop are the people who are dissatisfied with the status quo. However, they go into the extreme, and so the superhero's job
I
is
haven't
to
watched any of them, by the way, except
it's
Batman.
it's so repetitive that it wouldn't matter which one
Long
you'd
time
watch.
ago,
But
Ghostbusters.
this
But
is
hero
this
movies.
is the story arc. The bad guy is not satisfied with the status quo, tries to change it, goes overboard into the extreme. The job of the superhero is to say, yes, this is a problem, but you've done it in a way that shouldn't be done. End of story is everything stays exactly the fucking same. If you watch any of these superhero movies, you will notice
also,
this one myth.
Everyone
Just this
gets
one myth.
saved. Don't forget that.
Yeah. This is how everything goes back to normal. So the status quo is retained. So the superhero's job in these movies is not to like challenge the system in any capacity. It's to retain it.
And so our discussion about charlatanism would say, yeah, the things that superhero did, fucking fantastic. But still, this isn't the totality of myth.
Right.
These are just little things that were done that are fine. Great, thumbs up.
That's in those movies. All you're seeing is one of the 33 myths being projected. So either we need to progress, we need to achieve some greatness, we need to.
Right. Yeah. It's just so basic, I guess.
Yeah, it's just a reiterating of the status quo over and over and over and over and over again. The hero's journey that we're discussing in Portal Mountain, for, on the other hand, is a literal letting go of that myth entirely and coming back
as
to
far
the
as
body,
what hero is, how it can be defined,
and coming back to the body that not only you inhabit but everybody, right? Like that this is the difference between the child
the treasure
and
is
the adult.
You could say the treasure is membership in the guild.
The adult sees.
And then there's a struggle through
mass.
There's a struggle up to back to society through mastery.
Right, to connect back with the roots,
to make that loop
from the childhood again, to return to re-envision.
I like that
one's own childhood in the way that is already matured.
What's the author's name again? I always forget. Hero's Journey, Myth of 1,000 Faces, or Hero with 1,000 Faces.
Campbell.
Joseph Campbell, yeah.
That's Campbell.
And
huge
he came
influence.
up with
I hate Jung, but I love this guy.
He came up with the Hero's Journey. I never studied that too much.
I'm saying that because
the Hero's Journey. Fuck Jung. Okay, we're good. We're over that.
He just loves Jung himself.
There's
Campbell loved Jung.
You're walking along as a normal dude that's at the top of the chart.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you're dropped into participation.
Right. Not of your choosing. You're dropped into the real world, so to speak.
It's
like a child being
you still don't know what's going on, but it's like you've seen enough that
you should be ready for it.
You're kind of changed and you're drawn to what is this? The hero's journey. So then membership as the treasure itself, and then your way back up mastery through back up to the overworld, if you will.
So in that context,
to connect and potentially your effects would be often to cause participation.
So in programming, we call this the happy path.
Encourage participation.
So in programming, what you're describing is like the happy path.
Right.
But more nuanced to that is that you don't necessarily, if you take the deep dive, you don't necessarily resurface back up, and it could basically destroy you.
Right. And definitely the difference between diving into participation into the underworld, if you will, and the actual finding of treasure, that's like a labyrinth type of idea.
Yeah.
Like as to, and this is the Buddhism 101 point that Mr. Anti-Semite, one of the things he brought up.
Which one? Now I'm curious. I forget. I kind of ignored most of it. So
just that there's no enlightenment can't be traced back to rational calculation of the layers that formed it, if you will.
Okay. Well, yeah.
Like, in other words, it's not a purely rational formulaic thing, as if that, like, that's what it,
Yeah.
you know, his thing.
So yeah, in a space full of
But I'm made to think that was just a parroting, if you will, in some ways, of just trying to beat a rule over someone's head, or like, it's like this, it's like that. Little tidbits of knowledge, right? The sound bites.
yeah, the thing that struck me the most odd about his entire approach there is that I told him, like, at least several times over the course of that conversation that you are in a room full of essentially Buddhists. You should probably tailor your advice to people who are already, you know,
Right.
understand
I
the
know, yeah.
concepts. And his
Mhm.
response was that I hate Buddhists. And I'm like, in what sense are you fucking talking about this? Like,
Yeah,
you can,
right.
yeah, I mean, yeah, sure, if I knew you, if I knew exactly what you were coming from and blah, 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 we could have this kind
And
of
then, like,
discussion.
a tiny
because
bit of-
I, believe it or not, I too don't enjoy most Buddhists' rhetoric.
Of course.
Because they're too indoctrinated into,
Right.
like, sutras and suttas and all of that stuff.
Mhm.
They don't, like, seem to appreciate the fact that those are poems.
Right.
Like, they are poems. They're not. They're not manuals. They're thoughts. I mean, like that. That's what you do with the Buddha. You kill him. What did I just do? I killed the Buddha. How? I said they're thoughts. They're not They're not manuals. They're not.
Mm-hmm.
They're not
Right.
a physical entity.
Yeah.
That's how the
And,
Buddha
like,
is killed.
Ironically,
If you
he
will.
was trying to, like, deeply make this point, like a fucking having been retarded extensively
Ugh,
person.
just fucking so fucking
put it
tired of
politely.
it. Tired. That's why I said Geiger wasn't even. Is that the right way to say it? I'm not sure.
I would.
It's like, no, Geiger's not mad. We're all so fucking tired of having to repeat this shit. It's like women and incels. No, they don't put makeup on for you, you moron. Like, no. And that's why you're a moron, right? Like, there's
Wait,
no
was
other.
that the fourth term that we were missing?
Yeah. Moron is something that is the unofficial term that you can.
And what does it denote?
Somebody who is an idiot. Continually being an idiot after being told they're an idiot, and when you're when you're too frustrated to carry on the conversation because they're just fucking trolling you. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I just
So
don't
there's
need to talk
there's
to
two levels
to
to
a
idiot.
moron.
One is a natural idiot, which, hey, it feels good, you do it, whatever. Then the moron is when you're told,
Like-
socially you receive lots of feedback that what you're doing is
Pretty fucking stupid.
idiocy.
You're stupid. You're
Right.
choosing the stupid things, which makes you an idiot.
Yeah, which there's nothing wrong with that. But a moron.
But a moron will be
that's-
like,
that's-
I'd rather be the idiot.
There's more than that.
And it's not so much a way to insult people, but a way to indicate the level of their coherence. The coherence of a level of a moron. Do you
Yeah, I feel that. It seems like
There-
moron would be the
It's just-
master of hostile.
it's different than, say, a callous. Callous you may want to spend energy on. you really don't want to spend any energy on morons. Like,
I
why?
wish we should have time, but we don't, to look up from the glossary and all that and get into definitional stuffs, but we don't have to because we are, I think, wrapping up pretty much last 10 minutes, let's call it,
Mm-hmm.
of this live stream in which we've delved into mythology. What was our tagline again?
Here's something that I don't think we dwell hard enough into.
The significant layer. I don't see it here, but I remember that. It's
It's
significant.
the most significant for our interpretation.
That's our way of saying higher or lower.
Yeah,
on
it's the same layer that, say, the notions of gods make sense to people. The overarching authority.
Right, and ultimately we're in narrative here. This is all just narrative from
So-
the neurochemical OS perspective.
Yeah, and all we're really saying is that because we perceive everything through narratives, that there is this high-level narrative that encompasses like the godlike structure, the archetype-like structure, the top-down authoritative, so to speak.
And so again, I want to say, like, the meaning of life, who am I? This question, if properly, I guess, digested, points towards the correct thing that we're pointing to right here. And this is your overarching, like, your meta myths, right? There's this kind of hierarchy of narrative, right?
Yeah, the way to really think about it, like, on the one level you have the English language, right? But then you have like all of the different stories that you've heard from English-speaking people. So
Or experienced. That's the only reason it is a language.
it's like fairy tales. It's like have you grown
All
up with Brothers Grimm?
Every expression which uses English adds to what English is.
True, but also think of English in England, English in Australia, English in Canada, and English in the southern USA.
Think about
It's
English
the
between
same
your
language.
family or your neighbor or across the street.
Same point, yes.
It's completely just as diverse.
But you get more hits.
Crosstalk, if you will.
You get
Things
more
I
hits
wouldn't-
and misses the closer the locale is.
Mhm.
And you get more
It's,
misses
media.
than hits.
Media.
Like, try to talk to somebody from Jamaica
Shared media.
with their slang. They speak in English. Those are English words, but that's not English.
Or as like Scottishes and
Right. Like, again, it's like, yes, the same words,
Irishes.
but definitely not the same message. Like, not in any way. Just saying "ya" here. People hear "ya," they think yes. Anybody from Jamaica is going to hear God. Same word,
yeah, man.
different. And of course, I'm being like reductive. Like, don't.
So you do have a time limit today, don't you? Correct. I'm assuming as normal. I didn't really.
We have
didn't check in.
we have weather lenience.
But well, that's a reason to leave earlier, if you will. Right?
Between 5 and 6.
You just decided that?
No.
No. It's a new year, new Zhenya.
No. just this instance, pretty much.
Nice. Okay. Well, let's extend this an hour then, because we'll be home by 6 instead of 5.
Let's make it a half.
Okay. Guess I
So-
wasn't fully informed to the agreement.
You know, so I didn't think much of it. The other real thing
You gotta warm up the car, right? Yeah.
the other thing of significance, though, is that all of this is wrapped up in dream. So we're talking about past and future,
This is
negligent of the
I
moment.
feel like this is if you want to. We're stepping a layer meta, if you will.
Yeah, to just like wrap it up, kind of thing.
Okay. So dream as a facility as opposed to moment. You could say like this is something we should be able to slow down and look at happening. When you stop and analyze the dream, it's in the moment that you do that kind of thing. So that's a way of looking at it, that there is a, you can watch
Also-
yourself go into a moment and then just whisk back to your dream and not look at moment for another, who knows, another year
Well,
till you look at moment again.
Look at what we say dream is composed of, in general, without getting like nitty gritty into details of this dream, that dream. Is that dream consists of regrets for the past and anxiety for the future, aka, how do I fix my current world based on the picture I have from the past, so that all of the anxieties I have for the future based on said past and the regrets that I've had, because the regrets are one-to-one to what you're anxious about.
Pardon.
The thing
Yep.
you failed at is the thing
not do
you're
that
anxious
again.
about.
Don't want it to happen again.
So future is basically a different version of the past in this
Yep.
building.
Potential
build-up.
replay, of which there are unlimited.
So the connection I'm trying to make here is like what glues to the spectrum of stupidity, what glues to the idiocy, what glues to the retardation, is this the deontological matrix in which everything is said to happen
Yeah.
is the dream world, so to speak, which is essentially qualified by regrets and anxieties.
Right. I get the feeling that you're pointing
So-
at model as being the logical thing to start looking at. Slow down, do a meditation of, let's look at the moment.
Couple of things.
What is the moment?
That-
What is the dream? Once you identify that, that's the meditation itself.
That
Right.
but also this is very subtle here, but the notion of regret for the past and anxiety for the future simply indicates that the future is a reformulation of the past itself. There is no picture of the future that isn't expressed without the mythology that has been expressed by the past. So, for example,
Right.
when we're improving ourselves, right, myth of progress,
Yeah.
we're progressing from past failures.
I'm reminded of reification again, where this is talking mechanism of like the shifting window, I think. But the reification, to be anxious, to be in a state of anxiousness, that must be this mythological realism, right? Which is natural, supposed to be, that's how it's supposed to work. But if you're not, the meta myth should be reified, if you will.
The
Right?
strong,
As in
there's a stronger point I'm trying to actually drive at.
the one that takes apart and dismantles.
You have to see the future as the past. So, so to bridge the gap between the regret and the anxiety, right? The future itself must be reframed as a variation of the past, model-wise, cognitively. Like, you have to cognitively say to yourself,
Okay.
oh, this future is the
So you're
past.
saying this is like a meditation to help you with anxiety, because anxiety is about the future. To, in the moment, meditate on anxieties is to link them to past. That's if you know what happened in the past to even cause that, right? This is a pretty far stretch.
Even more basic. Everything you see as your future
I just mean it's
is
a hard
actually
thing
a
to do.
repetition of the past.
Yeah.
It ties into like the Buddhist past lives things as well,
Right.
but it's not meant to be like all
okay.
scientific about
Okay,
it.
so you're not talking about like specific trauma targeting.
No.
But just the fact of that it's from the past bin. That's what this anxiety is, purely from things of
Even your very articulation of the future is basically an attempt to rearrange what you've already experienced in your past. So whatever structure that you imagine
Yeah.
for your future
Mhm.
consists of elements of the past only.
It seems
It's
you're
built out
just
of it.
trying to describe a facility, basic projection of
Well, it ties
temporal
into the meditation is like where you can really understand your anxieties for the future
time.
as regrets for the past.
Time is part of our environment.
And so you can't control the future. You can control how you feel about the past. Do you see what I'm saying there? So if the future is your past, then the only thing you need to do to resolve the future anxiety is to resolve the regrets of your past. They're not different from each other. They're so intimately
Yeah. Okay.
interlinked
Yeah.
that it future and past need to
Well,
blend together.
okay.
That's how you get to your moment.
We need to differentiate between like regrets and traumas. I think.
A regret is something that happened to you. An anxiety is something that you imagine to happen to you.
I guess.
And
Yeah.
they're
If you're
both
expanding regret,
and they're both structured on the same
usually
premise.
regret is something you wish that you had done or didn't did do differently.
Which
But
is how you imagine your future.
Meanwhile, everything that happens to us isn't just our own fault.
Yeah, no,
And
this
that's
is
not
this
the
is not to say
entire
that.
pool of experiences to draw from when projecting anxieties.
No, I think
we also have things that happen to us, which I wouldn't say, like, can you call it a regret?
No, I'm using the word regret slightly differently than that. So there's the personal regret, like I regret doing such and such. But then there's
Sure.
then there is the feeling of regret of like I hate that this happened, that you had no control over, and you can be anxious about both. Right? You can be anxious about what you do.
We
You can
just
be anxious
had
about
to
what other people
expand
do.
that because the word regret implies like
Self.
that I did something
Yeah,
wrong.
no, I'm not talking about that.
Right.
Regret the situation, regret the fact of something happening. Much more general. It's more like
It's a bit of an appropriation, maybe.
yeah, and this is why it's like it feeds so tightly into anxiety for the future because you're not necessarily are anxious about your own actions. You're
Hold.
You're not anxious about the fact that you've done something so much as you're anxious about the fact that other people will fuck you over again and again and again.
Well, it's
as
it's a pain, like a pain database, pain record.
In Buddhist terms, this would have all been classified as dukkha. Dukkha, whatever you want to pronounce
Yep.
it as. It's just that feeling of
And everyone has it.
no matter what past presses onto the future, regardless of which moment you're in, and the skill involved is like,
Man, like
how do
I
you
want to
stop
get into this,
sweating?
but I'm wondering
How do you
too, are
stop
we
sweating?
actually like signing this off here?
well, yeah, this is the sign off. How do you stop sweating this shit? How do you like get beyond like using edgelord terminology, which we also do, and actually combine it with having a fucking point? That's the role of mythology,
Those are nice.
and so what's the end result of that conversation? It's a very failed mythology, and it didn't run through us because we were not going to be like. Buddhism is not dogmatism. We're not doormats. There is. I really don't understand the people that
Right.
think this because, if you go into a Shaolin temple and you try to pull some fucking weird shit like this,
Media is challenging though, like having shared spaces,
Do you not- do you-
digital spaces and all
do
that.
people not understand
Admin.
that they can get a roundhouse to the face if they strike the wrong Buddhist incorrectly? Because Buddhism is not dogmatism. There's no turn the other cheek philosophy going on. And it's a weird take on it too. This is me ranting about like my interactions with Reddit. It's like not very Buddhist of you. After I called them a moron for
Stood up for yourself or something.
I called them a moron for the third time, for the same reasons.
But you meant
that we've
it according
discussed.
to a strict technical
Oh yes,
definition.
I always go by my definitions. I never, you will never see me utter it without those things in mind. Actually, that's something I am very
Yeah.
particular about.
Well, it's kind of, to me, it's like holding on to some cards. Like when you're playing poker or something like that, like not showing your hand or whatever. There, it kind of, using like these striking terminologies leaves things open later on. Like if there is actually a conversation happening, then there's going to be some really cool, like already set up.
Yeah, but if like honestly, if the conversation is not happening and you're not like down with it, then this is not the fucking conversation we'll have, and that's fine too. That's not the conversation you need. If you don't need to feel like you're an idiot.
Still dark out, eh? Can you believe it? It's 5, and I've already had to adjust the brightness here, and I turned on a light, and it's like it's not enough.
So I guess what the final message would be for us is that our approach to mythology is not only flexible and inclusive, I guess you could say, in that sense, but it also doesn't like leave them without like turning every stone, being like, what the fuck is this mythology is even saying?
Yeah, right. Like the way that we engage that person in good faith to like, hey, like explain how you're using these words and what are you even trying to say, and like he's just like going off on like his own tangent hurricane. Nobody knows what the point is. What the fuck is the point? That's
Other
as
than
you
grouping
said.
people together for extermination,
And when you have this,
which is the worst part of it.
this is what's called the obfuscated meta narrative. It never begins at any point. There's no, whatever is beginning, whatever is said here and there doesn't actually lead to anything. Whereas take any point in our discussions ideally and it would just lead to the self kind of stuff.
And then
The meta myth
yeah, it tends to have a
Just
very similar trajectory.
unfold, right?
Put the pieces together, something emerges. What does that emergent thing does? How does that affect the pieces that put it together back? We are the pieces. Yeah.
Mhm. Peace.
One last one. Never leave them hanging. After our cheers.
Oh, well, we knew that. That was your lesson. Thanks for that. And we shall be right back. I do.
Mm.
I do want to. Yeah.
So, I'm not
Where were we?
Just saying, I'm not sure exactly how
Final
much.
remarks
Yeah, pretty basic.
of the episode.
I'm not sure how much we managed to dictate of how mythology
So mythology, the significant layer.
occupies the decision process, the um, driver behind all of the scientific com- how you recombine your quote unquote scientific knowledge with your mythological understanding, right? Like, and for each individual, that basically is a different picture, different mapping, a different. There's more rejection of this, more acceptance of that, in different cases. So, yeah, we're basically
Reconciling, that seems like an important topic. I'm not sure I quite got that, but I think I was thinking something like that.
I think I didn't say this the correct thing. I was trying to say that the mythology is the primary driver of how the scientific details get interpreted in your mind.
Right. Yeah.
So when you say something to somebody who claims to be an anti-Semite that has zero of the same context, that's not gonna speak the same way to them that it does to them. To
That's
us.
why I wanted to try to point to the scientismistic mind being obsessed with kind of categories and APSE type stuff. It seems like, how do you reconcile that with mythology, right? And that seems like an important bridge to jump.
So the mythology is the driver of what you will accept as reality, or what you won't. Every single word spoken to you is going to be filtered through your mythology.
But here's the problem with scientism is realism.
It's a mythology.
Realism, it's not the mythology. The fact that it's a mythology isn't a problem. It's that it's reified. That there's no outside observer watching itself do a mythology.
How is this a problem? Sorry.
Because then you reify onto the environment. There has to be a meta mythology overwatching, like a watchdog of the mythology itself. And if that's missing, this is a problem. And scientismistic thinking causes this type of.
What this is missing is the model of reification.
Right.
So if you don't.
That's another way of saying.
So if you
pointing to
reify
the
something without model and reification itself, yes, that's plausible, very plausible.
Right.
Which is
all
more
that's missing.
Common.
If that isn't missing, then everything is fine. Just use your myth and start making it better.
Right. Yeah. Observe feedback, improve.
Yeah. So that's the meta myth revisited.
But my serious point is this: is the fact that myth is also the top down layer of causality. And the point I'm trying to make there is that it doesn't really matter all that much if you apprehend the bits and pieces of what the cosmology is made up of. It's going to be the mythological narrative that overarching it that's going to drive purposes, decisions, anything to do with your understanding of that cosmology.
Isn't it weird?
It's so top down that
isn't
you
it
cannot
weird
escape it.
that top down model is presented in a way of like stories and so-called irrational presentations that you can't really nail it down to being just one thing. Like it always comes in a package that can be interpreted in so many ways. The mythology, right?
It's actually exposing the necessity for a meta myth.
What is
That fact, what you just mentioned. Like, you have it happen this way, you have it happen this way, you have it happen this way, you have it happen this way. What is the overarching myth that makes this true, that true, this true, even though they're not communicating with each other? Right? And that's the bubbling up stuff
Right.
from the body stuff. But at the same time, it can be warped in so many different ways, taking a connotation and making it about a denotation, that it swerves the purpose of the actually had conversations.
Well, each myth is kind of like an adventure of its own, encountering the being in its own unique way, in its own story, and unfolding.
But in many different ways, a myth always tells how a certain person encounters that situation in a way that other people have encountered that situation, right? So like
Usually a way that's ideal somehow.
right. So whenever you hear about a myth, it's not you. It's about somebody else in the story doing
Right.
the things, and you are
And
that somebody.
here's a weird thing is that the seed material for these myths often come from real life accounts of actual people.
The body. That's what I meant when I said the body earlier.
Right. The body. Is
Yeah.
these things actually happened in experience,
But the very
not as you imagine it exactly, but the way it was experienced has been imagined, and now you are reading that.
idealized.
Right? How else do we convey ideas? You know, we try to, even a reporter tries to tell facts, right? You just convey what has happened, what you've seen, but there's always interpretation, no
That's
matter
the
matter
whole
what.
idea. That's the whole idea behind archetypes. So you would have these idealistic forms of the thing that you think this thing is, but that acts as a projection. So what is a reporter? It's an archetype projected upon an activity.
Right. Okay.
The activity
So
still happen.
now let's
But
let's
there's
encounter
archetypes
our,
now that
our
that
problem.
present an ontological matrix.
Let's say instead of being a reporter, you are being to use the cliches, a banker or a Jew, like to get into that, like to associate certain professions and all that, like
The myth gets wilder. That's the first thing you see. There's a vast difference between job performant, right, acting in on behalf of the systemic role, and then there's like a caricature.
we also need
of a category of people
We need
that
to look
only
at-
have those roles,
we need to look at scapegoat. That category of people is scapegoated.
which is fucking a Jewish idea.
And
like it's such a
there's an irony in that, and the whole Christian line
which draws from the
with
same
that,
Bible.
as there is ultimate
Scapegoat.
forgiveness in a way, in that
Hmm.
the price has been paid. There is nothing to be paid.
An odd stance to
Period.
take for an organization that doesn't seem to recognize the meaning of the statement.
Right, and organizations as if there.
Oh,
but,
your sin's forgiven, but you still owe us.
History is such a messy thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Ready?
Yeah, man. On that note, beautiful live stream there. Thanks especially to Eon for participating, and for Geiger participating.
So, what's the difference between our usage of wrong terminology?
And this all came from this whole drama, which is ongoing, of this person. And still, there's another person in our chat as well who's
to answer my own question,
kind of
it's the mythology.
not associating, but knows this person and has spoke with them. Let's call troll, so-called troll.
Kind of funny that we've never seen them take a selfie like we did. Do they really know that person?
Together? Well, no, they it could be a Zoom selfie. That'd be the same. Nobody asked them to
It's
do
not
it.
the same.
It's not.
They didn't grow
It's
up
not
in
bad
each
that
other's presence.
they haven't produced that, but yeah.
I grew up in your presence.
That wasn't
Just
an
saying.
epic moment this morning, picking up Zhenya
Let's
during
go.
the storm, and the winter seems to have subsided,
Winter's coming.
and so has this live stream, which has gone over 20 minutes over expected, but
Alright.
it's for you, our
The
dear,
audience, we
our
love you.
dear Portal Mountain Development Meeting audience. Until next time.